The crystal clink of champagne flutes rose and fell like an impatient tide, but all I could hear was the soft squeak of my son's patent leather shoes as he swung his legs beneath the linen-draped table. The ballroom glowed in golds and creams, string lights spilling across white roses, silverware catching the shimmer of 100 candles. I smoothed the skirt of my slate blue dress, feeling the whisper of silk against my skin, and lifted my chin just enough to pretend I didn't notice the sideways glances. They still saw me as the girl who waited tables at Miller's Diner, the single mother who once smelled of fry oil and late nights. A woman to be pitied at best, mocked at worst. Across the room, a cluster of familiar faces leaned in close. One of them, my cousin Rebecca, lowered her voice, but not enough. Still a waitress, right? The words slid through the laughter, like a pin through fabric. My stomach tightened. I caught the faint scent of peonies from the centerpiece and inhaled it like armor. I reached for my phone when it buzzed, just a calendar reminder, but the vibration steadied my nerves. Beside me, 9-year-old Jacob looked up, eyes bright and calm. "Mom," he whispered, his small fingers brushing mine, "can I say something when they start the toasts?" My heart skipped. I nodded, though I had no idea what he planned. The room buzzed with polite chatter, completely unaware that my son was about to change everything. The night everything changed is burned into my memory like the hiss of a hot skillet. I was barely 20, working the late shift at Miller's Diner, when I felt the world tilt beneath me, first with a queasy certainty of morning sickness, then with the sharper sting of a blue line test. When I told Daniel, the boy I'd once believed would stand by me, his eyes went cold, the pale gray of February sleet. "Olivia, I can't do this. I'm not ready to be a dad. You'll figure something out, you always do." He left me in the parking lot with the smell of damp asphalt and frying bacon clinging to my clothes. The neon sign above the diner flickered, throwing my shadow across the hood of my dented Corolla. I drove straight to my parents' house, hoping for comfort, but the porch light was the only welcome I got. Inside, my mother sat rigid at the kitchen table, her Bible resting like a closed door between us. My father didn't even look up from the sports section. "You've embarrassed this family," my mother said, her voice low but sharp enough to cut. "You need to think about other options," my father added without meeting my eyes. My hands trembled against the chipped formica. The scent of their evening coffee, once so familiar, suddenly turned bitter in my throat. From the living room, my grandmother's cane tapped the hardwood. She entered slowly, her silver hair pinned in its habitual bun. Without a word, she reached beneath her cardigan and unclasped the delicate chain she always wore, a tiny gold locket, the one she'd received the day she became a widow. She placed it in my palm, her fingers warm and steady. "Strength," she whispered, the single word carrying decades of quiet battles. "You'll need it, but you already have it." I closed my fingers around the locket, its edges pressing into my skin until I felt something anchor inside me. My parents waited for me to apologize, to promise something I couldn't. Instead, I slid the locket around my neck and stood. "I'm keeping my baby," I said, my voice surprising even me, low, firm, final. The room fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock. My father finally looked up, but whatever he meant to say drowned beneath the steady tap of Grandma's cane as she moved beside me. That night, I packed 2 duffel bags and left. The sky was a dark, endless blue, the kind that hides both stars and answers. The locket rested against my heart, a small weight of defiance, and the first proof that I could stand alone. Those first months alone were a blur of exhaustion and coffee. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment over a hardware store on the far side of town. Cheap, drafty, but mine. The carpet smelled faintly of paint thinner, and the radiator clanked like it was keeping time with my heartbeat. I worked the breakfast shift at Miller's Diner, the same place where the truth had first unraveled, and took every extra table I could. Each morning started in darkness. I'd tiptoe across the creaky floorboards, Jacob balanced on my hip, his baby breath sweet and warm against my neck. I'd set him in the second-hand bassinet beside the kitchen while I packed bottles and my apron. By the time the sky lightened, I was out the door, the gold locket from Grandma cool against my skin, a quiet reminder of the promise I'd made. The work was relentless. Endless refills of burnt coffee, plates of hash browns that left a permanent scent of grease in my hair. Some customers smiled with pity, others looked through me entirely. I learned to keep my chin lifted, my order pad steady, my voice polite even when my heart was raw. There were nights Jacob screamed through fevers, and I showed up for the dawn shift with eyes like bruises. There were bills I paid late, meals I stretched thin, moments when the weight of single motherhood threatened to crush me. And yet, between every setback, tiny victories bloomed. When Jacob turned 3, the diner's owner, Lorraine, an auburn-haired force of nature in her 50s, started sliding me extra tables and slipping encouragement like sugar packets into my
palm.
"You've got grit, kid," she said once, while balancing a tray like a seasoned acrobat. "Don't you let anyone tell you a waitress can't build a life." Her faith steadied me. With every double shift, I saved a little more. First for a used car that didn't rattle like a tin can, then for night classes in bookkeeping at the community college. I studied at the kitchen table after Jacob's bedtime, the locket warm against my skin, his soft snores my soundtrack. The day I passed my final exam, Jacob ran into my arms, giggling as he clutched the paper certificate I'd framed for him to help paying. "Mommy, you did it," he shouted, as if my victory belonged to him, too. That was the quiet turning point. Within a year, I landed a steady-day job handling accounts for a small construction company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to move us into a sunny 2-bedroom with clean carpets and a playground just outside. I didn't broadcast these steps to anyone back home. My parents never called, and I never volunteered updates. I posted only modest snapshots, Jacob at the park, a stack of pancakes on Sunday mornings. Let them think I was still just the waitress girl with the baby. The truth, like the locket beneath my blouse, was mine to carry until the right moment. Every night, when the apartment finally fell silent, I'd touch the tiny gold charm and whisper the same words my grandmother had spoken: strength. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was becoming the kind of woman and mother who turned whispers of pity into the sound of quiet, undeniable pride. 9 years later, the scent of peonies and candle wax brought the past rushing back. The country club's ballroom glittered beneath strings of fairy lights, each bulb winking like it knew a secret. Jacob's small hand rested in mine, his palm warm and steady as we walked toward our assigned table. This was my cousin Rebecca's wedding, the same Rebecca who, in a kitchen years ago, had clucked her tongue and whispered about the waitress girl with the mistake. She hadn't changed much. Still a porcelain smile, still the kind of confidence that fed on other people's insecurities. "Olivia," she called when she spotted me, her champagne flute catching the light. Her hug was cool, all perfume and calculation. "You look nice." "Still at the diner?" The question was sugar-coated, but the glint in her eyes was sharp. A few relatives nearby exchanged knowing looks. I heard a man chuckle softly, the sound barely disguised by the clink of silverware. I let the comment hang. Years ago, those words would have sliced through me. Tonight, they slid off like rain on polished glass. I smoothed the skirt of my midnight dress and gave her a pleasant, unreadable smile. "It's good to see you too, Rebecca." We took our seats near the dance floor as the band shifted from jazz to something soft and romantic. Candlelight flickered across Jacob's face. At 9, he carried himself with a quiet assurance that startled me sometimes. He looked up, his brown eyes catching the glow. "Mom," he whispered, "when it's time for toasts, can I talk?" My breath caught. "Do you want to?" He nodded, the corners of his mouth curving in a hint of mischief. "Yeah, I want them to know." Before I could ask what he meant, the best man clinked his glass. A hush fell over the room. One by one, the toasts began, flowery words about love and forever, punctuated by polite applause. Then Jacob rose from his chair. A ripple of surprise moved through the guests as he stepped toward the microphone, his small frame dwarfed by the towering stand. He adjusted it with the awkward confidence of a boy who'd watched adults long enough to mimic their moves. "Hi," he said, his voice clear, carrying easily in the sudden quiet. I'm Jacob. I'm Olivia's son. He glanced at me and grinned. My mom is the bravest person I know. A low murmur rolled through the crowd. Jacob continued, his tone steady. When I was a baby, it was just us. She worked really hard, sometimes 3 shifts in a row, so I could have food and books and a warm bed. She went to college at night, even when she was tired. She made a life for us, and she never gave up, even when people said she'd never make it. His words cut through the room like a bell. I watched Rebecca's confident smile falter, saw my parents stiffen at a nearby table. My mom isn't just a waitress, Jacob said, his voice rising slightly. She runs the finances for a big construction company now. And she's the best mom in the world. He paused, eyes scanning the room with a seriousness beyond his years. So, if anyone ever thought she couldn't do it, you were wrong. The microphone hummed in the silence that followed. Jacob handed it back to the best man and walked to me. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then thunderous. My son slipped his hand into mine as people rose to their feet. For a moment, the years of whispers and pity dissolved under the sound of clapping. My chest swelled with something larger than pride, a fierce, unshakable love. The girl who once left home with nothing but a locket and a heartbeat of courage had become a woman no one could dismiss. As the applause softened into a low hum of conversation, I felt the ballroom tilt, not with fear this time, but with the quiet gravity of recognition. People who had once looked at me as if I were a cautionary tale now struggled to meet my eyes. Champagne glasses lowered. The clink of silverware ceased. Rebecca approached first, her veil of confidence slipping. Olivia, she began, voice thinner than I'd ever heard. Your son is remarkable. I offered a small smile. Thank you. He's my greatest blessing. She hesitated, the way someone does before stepping into cold water. I didn't know. About your work. About everything you've built. You never asked, I said gently, not to wound but to state a fact. You preferred the story you already believed. Her cheeks flushed. You're right. And I'm sorry. Before I could reply, my parents approached. My mother clutched the strap of her beaded purse as if it could anchor her. My father's shoulders, once so square, seemed to fold inward. Olivia, my mother whispered, we misjudged you. We thought we were protecting you, but we turned away when you needed us. I let the silence stretch, the weight of years settling between us. Jacob leaned against my side, the warmth of his small body steadying me. I forgive you, I said at last, but forgiveness doesn't erase the past. If we're going to rebuild anything, it has to be different. My father's eyes shone, what under the fairy lights? What do you need from us? I looked at both of them, people who had once turned me out, now standing uncertain and bare. Start by being grandparents to Jacob. Call him. Visit. Show up not because you're ashamed of what happened, but because you love him. And stop speaking of me as if my worth depends on anyone else's approval. My mother nodded slowly, tears gathering. We can do that. I turned to Rebecca, who lingered at the edge of our circle. And you, stop measuring other women by the narrowest standards. You don't know the battles they're fighting. Her lips trembled. I will. It wasn't vengeance I felt, only a quiet relief. The power was never about proving them wrong. It was about living true until they had no choice but to see me clearly. As the band struck up a slow melody, Jacob squeezed my hand. Can we dance, Mom? Yes, I said, a smile breaking through the last of the old ache. We moved onto the floor beneath a canopy of lights. Around us, relatives began to sway, tentative but trying. My parents watched, then joined. Awkward, hesitant, but present. I rested my cheek against Jacob's hair, the locket warm against my skin. Tonight wasn't about winning. It was about drawing a new map of family one boundary at a time, on terms I finally set. Long after the last champagne glass had been cleared and the music softened to a final hush, the ballroom lights dimmed to a warm golden glow. Jacob leaned sleepily against my side, his small heartbeat steady as a metronome. I brushed a wisp of hair from his forehead and felt the faint thrum of satisfaction that no applause could match. Across the room, my parents sat together, shoulders touching, a quiet, tentative bridge between the years we had lost. My mother caught my eye. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic speech, just a small, almost shy nod. It was enough. Rebecca approached, barefoot now, her earlier poise replaced by something softer. "Olivia," she said, her voice almost fragile. "Thank you for letting me see who you really are. I needed that." I offered a gentle smile. "We all need reminders sometimes." She squeezed my hand, then slipped away toward the dance floor. For the first time in years, I felt no lingering edge of resentment, just the quiet release of a burden I'd carried too long. Jacob stirred and whispered, "Mom, did I do okay?" I cupped his face, kissed his temple. "You were perfect. You spoke the truth." Outside, the night air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. I tipped my head back to the dark sky and felt the weight of my grandmother's locket against my chest. I held it between my fingers, the gold warm from my skin. "Strength?" I murmured, hearing her voice as clearly as if she stood beside me. It wasn't just about surviving the hard years. It was about the grace to forgive, to define my own worth, to raise a son who understood what courage looked like. Jacob slipped his hand into mine as we walked toward the car. "I love you, Mom," he said, his voice small but certain. I tightened my grip, a quiet smile curving my lips. "I love you more." The past would never vanish, but tonight it no longer defined me. The girl who had once left home with nothing but a gold locket and a heartbeat of resolve had become a woman who needed no one's permission to stand tall. And with my son beside me, I stepped into the night, strong, unshaken, and finally, completely seen.